Good morning, everybody. If we could stand and salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to take note all commissioners are present today. And are there any agenda changes?
We have, it's not really an agenda change, but just a note that item number 8 has been, the denial has been rescinded, so there will not be a hearing on that item. So both 7 and 8, there will be no 8. Both of them. Both 7 and 8 have been rescinded, and therefore there will be no hearing on those two items.
Okay, thank you. On that note, we will go into public comment for items not on the agenda.
Of course. Good morning. As you know, I always like to see you folks. You're my favorite gathering of appointed officials in Calaveras County. This is where a lot of decisions are made, and the state leaves it to the counties to make these land use decisions, and we live with it, and I very happily live with it, but you are making the decisions. I better speak up for Mr. Bocelli.
Thank you.
I spent the past 2 days doing surveys with a crew of surveyors and survey workers provided by the Jackson Rancheria. They are picking up the tab for fencing and surveying on some properties of mine, and I enjoyed that very, very much. When I was younger, I studied over in an office in Jackson, DePauli's office. It's that little building right next to St. Patrick's Church across from the courthouse. And when he passed away, he left me his books. He left the St. Patrick's, he left the building, and he left the books to me, and I was very grateful. He left a few other things. God bless his soul. One of those books was a book on surveying, and in the preface to that book it says, "Accuracy is akin to honesty." And I want you to remember this. When you go forth and you come up with a plan, such as, say, a marijuana ordinance, you must identify what you want to do in that ordinance before beginning the process, who you want to protect, and during the rest of the process, you want to fill in a very detailed. You want to be very detailed in the way you write that ordinance and make sure that those people are protected. As you know, we've had some more delays in the urgency or the regulatory ordinance or ban. It is very important that when you send that new regulatory ordinance back to the Board of Supervisors that you send the ban with it as well, because in the wording of our supervisor, Gary Tofinelli, if he does not approve of the changes, he will approve the ban. Also, bring back no action at all, going with the state as well. The state wants, because I want this finished at the next meeting. I don't want to go to a board meeting. I am not a scatologist. I do not appreciate the time delays here anymore. It's just been too long. We have to get this over with. We have developers that are probably anxious to get this over with as well. And a group of people came to me the other day, 10 of them, and they are very anxious to get this over with. So please include all the options, make sure that all the options are complete, that it is in the packet, that they can't claim that we have to send it, we have to have another meeting in order to address this issue. And understand that you cannot make any changes except which were specified by the board. And I'm sorry about that because it doesn't protect the people that I want to protect. And I see that you feel that same way too, Mr. Commissioner Lanish, right? Yeah. But we have to do what we have to do, move along. Thank you for your time today. Oh, I have another minute and 30 seconds, but I won't. I always like to get my money out of the county. It's one of those things. Eventually, I will get my money out of the county, but one thing at a time. Okay. Thank you again for diligent this.
Thank you. Annette, that seemed like a lot longer than 5 minutes.
I started a little late. I apologize.
Okay. You got your 5 minutes. You got your 5 minutes. Thank you. The timer was slow to get started. Yes, we're sure. Good morning.
Good morning, and I'll start with my usual disclaimer. My husband has no idea what I am going to say, nor is he responsible for anything I say. Because of the marijuana ordinance coming back to the Planning Commission and the inaction of our Board of Supervisors, I thought you should know something about the timeline. The state has something called a temporary license application. What it takes to begin with is a copy of a valid license, permit, or other authorization. Now, if you ask the state what other authorization is, and if it will be the ones that are pending, they can't tell you for sure a yes or no answer. There is the possibility with the state that the pendings will be considered as being permitted, which would definitely increase from the 180 some we have to whatever is left pending. That, the 180 something, if they get a temporary state license, which is good for 120 days, and then you and the county pass an ordinance such as what Mr. Tofinelli put forward, which would definitely decrease the 180 something, the state has no way of revoking any permit or license it has issued. That means even if you take it down to what Mr. Tofinelli put forward in his plan, that's not going to affect anything because the state does not have a process, nor are they even working on a process for revocation of licenses. So we will still have the 180 some, and as I said, possibly whatever is pending, according to the state. They also said, and I'm getting this from the Cal Cannabis website and talking to the people there, which is California Department of Food and Agriculture. They also said that they are pretty much figuring that they won't have permanent licensing all the way worked out for up to 2 years. So everybody's going to be doing these temporary licenses over and over again. I want you to know about the non-revocation, the timeline, and why it is so critical to have Mr. Tofinelli's plan in effect before December 31st. Because if it's not, it might as well not be in effect at all, because the state has no way of going back and taking it to that at this time, and nor are they looking at it And this is from their employees that are saying that. We got that from 2 different departments. We got that from California Department of Food and Agriculture, and we also got that from their California Cannabis Bureau. They have no clue at all. All they know for sure is they're going to be in absolute chaos on January 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
I'd like to, I don't know what Vicki was going to say, but kind of start a little bit before her comments and go through them and a little bit afterwards. You know, with this whole thing starting to unfold, I actually get the feeling that it's starting to fold back up again. After spending 2.5 very painful days at a Planning Commission meeting, considering 2 alternatives, the Planning Commission decided to punt both of them back to the Board of Supervisors with no indication of which one, no preference. When we finally got to the board meeting, those 2 items were on the agenda, but neither one of them was discussed. They went right beyond that into hearing things about Supervisor Toffanelli's plan. Well, there's been so many changes to 1795. We had, you know, that's the urgency ordinance, some changes since then. Mr. Laddish had a proposal that affected 1795. Now Mr. Toffanelli has something that is going to be called 1795. I think we have to start going back and calling them by their names, like the Laddish proposal or the Toffanelli plan or the Toffanelli regulatory scheme, so we know which document we're talking about. I've got about 4 stacks of paper that all say 1795. What was particularly troubling is, first of all, not having that addressed at the Board of Supervisors meeting, and then having the Board of Supervisors say, well, in order to roll this in, all the Toffanelli plan changes into 1795, it would have to go back to staff, and I think Mr. Maurer said something is going to be like a week or 2 to get that accomplished. And the board wanted to send it back to the Planning Commission. Mr. Maurer was asked specifically, does it have to go back to the Planning Commission? And he said, no, it doesn't. You know, that the board is entitled to make whatever changes they want. We now see that it's probably going to go back to the Planning Commission. As far as I know, I heard that on November 29th, you're going to have a hearing on this. To allude back to what Vicki was talking about, the changes are taking so long. This thing is at a snail's pace, and we're worried about the rat's nest that may develop, if it's not already developed, at the end of the year, conflicting the urgency ordinance expiring on the 14th, the state regulations kicking in on the 1st. We've got pending applications left and right. We don't know what's going to happen to that. I've contacted the Bureau of Cannabis Control. They say the track and trace may be as far as 2 years out, which was the keystone of that whole program. As far as applications, they really don't know what they're going to do with applications. It's our understanding that people who have a permit can apply for a state license for cultivation. We know that the urgency ordinance excludes some activities, manufacturing and things like that. The urgency ordinance also sets aside, ignores dispensaries, saying that is covered under 1791. 1791 is now a teenager. That's a 13-year-old ordinance that had no way of anticipating these types of changes. We know that the dispensary ordinance does not have any real controls on how much cultivation can take place. So on January 2nd, our dispensary is going to be able to apply for permanent dispensary licenses, plus the new ones, the Type 10A, micro business, it goes on and on. Retail, home delivery, how are all those things going to be handled? It just seems to go on and on and on, and I get emails and phone calls continuously asking me to explain to the citizens what's going on. I can't tell them. All I see right now is if the Planning Commission is taking this up on the 29th, the board probably will not have it back in front of them until sometime in late December, very late December, which is a holiday month, or into January. The effective date, if they pass something, and that's a big if, it won't go into effect for 30 days after that. So how does this, it kind of ties in with what Vicki was saying. I mean, you can have a real conflict here of, who's on first, who's on, all that kind of stuff, with no clear direction from any of the ordinances as to how it's going to work out. Is the urgency ordinance is going away. We know that. You can't change that. You can't extend it. That's got an expiration date. 1791 does not have an expiration date. There is no real proposal out other than maybe the Tofanelli plan that may be coming forward and you're going to get. And I hope that, yes, you will consider a ban to go along with that. Make your recommendations, send it back to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment this morning? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. And I think we're going to have a simple discussion on consent agenda real quick.
So this is the first time we've had multiple items on the consent calendar, and I just want to sort of briefly go over what the purpose of the consent calendar is and how we would normally handle something like this. The consent calendar is something where it's sort of routine matters. Either you've already discussed it and it's bringing back a resolution on something that was already voted on, or often the minutes. In this case, we also have an item about the conformity finding. If there is a need to change something, then you would need to pull the item from the consent calendar. In the case of the resolutions, there were different votes on those resolutions. Approval of the consent calendar is saying, yes, this resolution reflects the action of the commission. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to pull it and re-vote on it. It's already been voted on. And so the action would be, if we accurately covered the action that was taken at the prior meeting, then you could just simply vote on the consent calendar. If you think it needs to be modified, then you would need to pull that item from the consent calendar. So I just sort of want to go through that. So if everyone's fine with everything that's on the consent calendar, all you need to do is say, I move the consent calendar, and move to approve the consent calendar. And the simple action to approve all three items. But if there's something that you feel you need to pull because you want to make a modification to it, or you want to discuss the item, then you can pull that item, and we'll discuss that after action on the remainder of the consent.
So if there's non-serious typos, well, we would have to take it off the consent calendar to correct the spelling of the word canopy, say?
If you felt it would affect the actual action you were taking, then otherwise I don't think you would have to.
I don't know whether to, I mean, there's a typo, say, in the title of the first one, and I don't want to ball up things by saying, gee, correct the spelling of the word canopy.
If you don't feel it would affect the results, and you don't want to actually have to have a formal discussion with public comment on the item, then I would recommend letting it go.
Just let it go. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Does the public have any comment on the consent agenda? Okay, nothing on the typo, we're good. Okay, so we'll go ahead and bring it back for approval or denial of the consent agenda. What would you like to do? Does somebody want to make a motion?
I have one more question. The votes aren't filled in on these, but we've already taken the votes.
Yeah, so we'll go back and we'll look
will
at the
fill
prior,
them
we'll
in
fill in
as
based
per
on the
voted.
action at the prior meeting, yes.
That's fine. I move we adopt the consent calendar.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So now we will go on to item 1, which is an extension of time for Red Mountain Resorts, Tuscany Hills project. And Deborah, you're handling that one?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah Lewis, Item 3. The project before you today is an extension of time for the Tuscany Hills tentative subdivision traffic map. This project was originally scheduled for your October 26th planning commission, but was continued until today.
We-
Can I ask?
It's still not on. Am I audible?
There you're on.
Thank you. The project was originally scheduled for the October 26th Planning Commission meeting. On October 20th, we received a letter from Golden State Equity Investors Incorporated indicating that there had been a restructuring of the project ownership. So we took a certain amount of time to collect the necessary deeds and signatures, indemnification agreements, and get them all approved as to form. And that has been accomplished with Julie's able assistance. Thank you, Julie. And the project applicant remains as Red Mountain Resorts, and it's my understanding that there are representatives of both groups in the room here today. And the request here is to extend the expiration date of the map by 3 years to allow them the additional time needed to accomplish recordation of the final map, and no changes to the previously approved project have been included as part of this action here today. Location-wise, you're probably all familiar with where this is. It is west of Tulloch Reservoir, it is south of Copper Cove and Saddle Creek, and the access to this site is by way of State Route 4 to Little John Road, and then all the way to the terminus of Little John Road at the Tuscany Hills lands. I included this map. I was hoping that it would actually be more legible than it is. To my mind, it's a nice summary of the developments that are out there. Tuscany Hills is here. It's a nice representation of all of the existing developments in the area. The historic town of Copperopolis, Coppertown Square, the lands slated for development in future as Sawmill Lake, the Oak Canyon Ranch development, and down here, lands that Castle and Cook envision as being a future Copper Valley Ranch development. This is actually a more colorful representation of existing and approved developments in the general area. This is our currently proposed general plan land use map. It depicts special plan areas, specific plan areas, developed areas. Tuscany Hills is indicated here with a pattern of specific plan on it. It is not actually covered by a specific plan. This development included the transfer of density from an off-site parcel of roughly 500 acres as part of the overall action for the project. So anyway, they are out there. There's a specific plan area associated with it, and then the Tuscany Hills development. A number of actions were taken by the Board of Supervisors in 2007. They passed an ordinance changing zoning. This is just indicative of the fact that there were lands that were to be slated for single-family residential. There were large acreage open space parcels that were to be set aside for complete environmental protection, and there were other parcels that were also designated rec but were to be set aside for active use, including golf courses and things like that. There were a number of resolutions that were passed. There was one that certified the environmental impact report, adopted CEQA findings, a mitigation monitoring program, and adopted a statement of overriding considerations. These are not actions that are under consideration here today. There may be questions associated with the statement of overriding considerations. We can certainly answer those if they come up. Again, the resolution that left the general plan land use designation as single-family residential with the 541-acre density transfer allowed this applicant to accomplish his proposed 335 single-family residences on this 1,113-acre parcel. This was the map as approved in 2007. It's not particularly legible, but it gives you an idea of the general arrangement of single-family residences, open space, golf course, and the like. This was posted on our planning department webpage for anyone who was interested in zooming in and looking at things more closely. And the approval documents had a lot of detailed information about total numbers of lots, styles of development that were envisioned at the time, open space lands versus lands in active recreational use. Again, these were all part of the original project approval, and it's not something that we're taking under consideration today. Our county code does allow us to issue an extension of time to a project developer if they are able to demonstrate that they have been making a good faith effort in pursuit of the conditions of the map. And our code specifically identifies the three possibilities: pursuing approval from other agencies, engineered design plans, and actual construction. So we were able to work with a lot of information that the applicant gave us. These are all actions that have been taken subsequent to the 2007 project approval, and in response to the requirements for specific mitigation measures. The attachment to your staff report has a lot more details of a matrix that explains in each case which specific studies were done, which drawings were prepared, which mitigation measures were addressed in each case, and we were allowed a certain amount of spreadsheet information from which we could conclude where the actual dollar expenditures were made in every case. So we attempted to summarize this here in the PowerPoint and in your staff report. This project had a very comprehensive environmental review. It was accepted in 2001. It was not approved until 2007. It went through a draft EIR, a revised draft EIR, and ultimately a final EIR. And then the documents that were adopted by the board at the end included the mitigation monitoring program, which is a substantially sized binder. We have a copy of that in the planning department. And a statement of overriding consideration was adopted with specific attention to, certain water circulation, such things as that. Again, these are not things that are under consideration today. The staff has reviewed all of the documentation that was presented to us, and we feel that the applicant has certainly done an adequate job to allow us to make the specific findings with regard to the efforts that have been made since 2007 to get this final map recorded. So staff does have a recommendation that the Planning Commission make the findings and allow this extension of time to go forward. So basically that's my skeletal presentation, and I'd be delighted to answer any specific questions that you might have.
One thing that is under consideration today is something that we're asked to sign off in the resolution. And that sentence is, there are no changes in circumstances or changes to the project description that would necessitate revisions to or recirculation of the environmental documents. And I'm quite concerned about questions of water supply. And if we're in the 2007 EIR, it indicated that cumulative water demand for projects in the future Copper Cove service area may exceed the amount of raw water available to serve the Copper Cove service area under existing CCWD permits. And that the impact, even after mitigation, was labeled significant and unavoidable. I'm not questioning the actions that were taken back then. I'm questioning whether new facts, such as a multi-year drought and questions about water supply from the Lake Tulloch to supply this area, have created new conditions that do indicate that there might be need for revisions or recirculation of the environmental documents to see where we are.
I would be delighted to address your concerns. I put together a brief bullet list. A little bit of this is kind of a skeleton response, and we can take it from there. I have no idea how legible that is from the back of the room. As we all know, Calaveras County is dependent on surface water. The Copperopolis area is dependent on surface water from the Stanislaus River system. And CCWD, under repeated questioning, has always assured us that they have senior water rights to this water pursuant to State Water Resources Control Board permit orders. At this time, they have a delivery of 6,000 acre feet annually to the Copper Cove service area at Tulloch Reservoir. Now, at the time that this document was approved in 2007, there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 connections in the area. I spoke with the building department and tried to get a sense of the total number of additional homes that have been constructed in the Copper Cove service area in the interim, and construction is progressing. It can be from as little as 5 additional homes in a year within the Copper Cove. Well, actually, the numbers they gave me address the entirety of District 4. And I don't know if we can conclude that everything in District 4 is dependent on the Copper Cove service area. But I would say, for the purposes of this discussion, yes. There were approximately 3,000 hookups. They have increased at the rate of from 10 to perhaps 30 per year over the intervening years up until 2016, where that data is complete. There is currently a permitted delivery of 6,000 acre feet annually to the Copper Cove service area at Lake Tulloch. That is pursuant to an order that was issued in 1997. The number up there is 97-05, and that order projected growth through 2015, but in an interesting way that we'll cover here in a bit. With the build-out of existing and planned service areas, with Tuscany Hills rolled in and projected through the year 2025, the use will only have risen to 3,408 acre feet of the 6,000 annually. That's one of my bullet points up here. By existing and planned service area, that is all of Copper Cove, basically all of the lands outside of this spate of new large developments. The next bullet point is described as build out of master plan future service area with Tuscany Hills. Now, projected through the year 2015, and presuming Oak Canyon Ranch was going to roll in, presuming, some of the Sawmill Lake, some of the other anticipated developments were going to roll in, and they were going to move forward at a reasonable rate of development, the use would be 4,450 acre feet per year through 2015. Again, that's build out of master plan future service area, not existing service area plus Tuscany. And then the reason a cumulative impact was identified and a finding of overriding consideration had to be made was because projected through the year 2025, with build out of the master plan future service area and Tuscany Hills, the use would be 7,216 acre feet annually, which is above the 6,000 acre feet annually that they currently have. Now, CCWD does not see this as an issue because to their mind, as the development occurs, as it is approved, they have the justification to pursue changes to their permit conditions that will allow them to bring this 7,216 acre feet of water down from above.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Okay.
Because I'm afraid, you've got this very well organized, and I'm afraid I'm going to forget what you've said. You are saying that the statement in the EAIR about cumulative water demand for projects in the future Copper Cove service area may exceed the amount of raw water available. You're talking that was referring to even more than what service to this proposed subdivision would entail. Is that correct?
Exactly, yes.
And so, if I understand you correctly, then right now, even though that statement's in the 2007 EIR, that CCWD has no worry that there will be enough water to supply the Tuscany Hills subdivision. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And do we have anybody from CCWD that's going to vouch for that?
We do not. Robbie Creamer has vouched for this in a telephone call to me. He has not done that yet in writing. I did not ask him to. his point, and it was a powerful one, is that unfortunately with the slowing of development in that area, nothing has really changed. There has not been an increase in housing stock in the interim that has substantially changed any of the conclusions in the report. They saw no need to update it.
Well, I'm
at all.
thinking more about the changes in the climate. That, I mean, as we know, Lake Tulloch was dropping considerably. That this water is, no matter where the senior water rights derive from, physically this water is being brought from Lake Tulloch to supply this area, isn't it?
Now, this is a subject that Robbie and I had a very, very detailed discussion about. Tulloch Reservoir, the concern in the 2015 timeframe and during the drought was that the water level was dropped in the lake. And it was headed toward being dropped to a point below which CCWD's intake pipes and their pumps would not be able to suck. So in the 2015-2016 timeframe, CCWD reconstructed, extended, and lowered their intake pipes and made changes to the pumps. And Robbie's statement was that they can currently draw from what they refer to as dead pool, which is as low as the lake can fall. The water level drops to a level below which no more can be drawn out. CCWD will always be able to withdraw their water. The question that I then raised to Robbie was, I understand, it is surface water, it's falling in the high country. The Stanislaus Riverine system is one of 3 methods that they bring their water down to Calaveras County so it can be used here. So they are not, they can always use that conveyance system to bring their water down from the high country, run it through the system, and they have the capability to draw it out even if it is down to dead pool. My question to him was, well, picture a catastrophic drought.
That's easy to do.
Water is not coming down. And this is a question that I must admit it took him a little by surprise, but he said, well, that's a very complex subject. It is not directly related to this project, and it would be indicative of a far, far larger problem of county-wide extent if that happened. And he said CCWD would certainly be delighted to sit down with the Planning Commission and address this, but as it stands, it is an issue of such magnitude that it really needs to be considered separate from this one development.
And was there any question when the water was dropping and CCWD was getting near where it couldn't draw the water out? Was there any question between CCW or conflict between CCWD and the irrigation district or whoever actually administers Lake Tulloch as to whose rights were senior?
I think that is, I had not heard of there being any conflict between them. CCWD has always identified their water rights as being pre-1927 and pre most of the formation of most of these other districts. It's 2 separate conveyance systems for 2 separate agencies. And the source of the water that CCWD gets in the high country is apart from the sources of other water that people get. So as far as they are concerned, this is a conveyance system only. And
I just seem to
concerns-
remember in the newspapers there was some controversy about, well, if it gets any lower, well, we're going to have to stop service to.
Well, if it gets any lower, they wouldn't be able to suck because their intake.
No, I
pipes
thought it
have
was
been
more a matter
extended
of
lower.
rights, but I understand that's a very
So
practical.
anyway, CCWD said they would be happy to come and speak to this issue at any time.
Then, just assuming we grant the extension today, what further opportunity before things are built would we have to review what the water question is before we reach a construction?
Well, our mitigation measures require that they work with CCWD and they execute the water service agreements and pay the fees that finalizes everything between the water agency and the developer in getting the water that they receive. Basically, they buy it and they pay for it and they record their final map. But I don't know that there is a place in there where the county can interject themselves into that process.
Well, it's not a matter of interjecting, but whether it won't naturally come back to us.
It will not come back to us. We have the opportunity to deny recordation of the final map if they do not have the water supply available.
And how would that issue come before us?
Well, they would have to come before us with proof that they had executed the agreements with CCWD and with a written statement from CCWD saying that the water is available and will be provided.
And then we on the county's own motion could say, wait a minute, we want to take a look at this?
I don't know. Do you want to address that, Peter?
So the recording of a final map is a ministerial act. So it doesn't come back to hearing at all. They have to satisfy all the conditions. As reviewed by Planning and Public Works and all the other agencies and entities involved. And as we check off each condition, if we find that it's satisfactory, it goes to the board, but they don't get to change the conditions. They don't, at that point in time, it's a finding of, did they satisfy the conditions? Is the map substantially in conformance with the approved tentative map? And it's.
But one of those conditions is water availability.
Right. And what Deborah was just explaining was that, there are certain things they have to go through to demonstrate that CCWD can serve the project.
But as a ministerial act, could you say, well, I don't agree with what CCWD has said, or are we bound by it?
If there is a question as to whether or not there's substantial evidence that they satisfied the condition, then I would think the board would have that ability to say, we don't believe that that condition has been satisfied. But they don't have the right to sort of interject their own, if they have substantial evidence to say, well, no, the CCWD is wrong, they don't get to sort of revisit the question of, is this condition the appropriate condition to the project?
I understand.
Well, I want to clarify, if the condition is you have to satisfy CCWD, and CCWD says they're satisfied, I don't think you get to contradict their determination.
Okay.
Okay, any commissioners have any other questions they'd like to have clarified?
Yes. The chart on the wall there, where it refers to the use will be 7,216 acre feet annually with build out of master plan future service area with Tuscany Hills at 2025. Does that include Oak Canyon?
Yes.
And the way the world seems now, Oak Canyon's not likely to go forward, is that correct?
Well, at this point in time, we understand that the current property owner has a different goal, but the general plan land use designation and zoning have not yet been changed to anything reflective of open space. They still reflect the specific plan and the development. So as that is the case, we must, until it changes, we presume that it is a possibility.
Going through the charts that are attached to the staff report on the work that's been done, it seems to me that while quite a bit of work was done back 2007, 2010 timeframe, much of that has been expired. The permits have expired, such as the California Fish and Wildlife Stream Bank Alteration Agreement was signed and it's expired. They have to reapply. The Corps of Engineers, they have to reapply for a jurisdictional determination. That expired in 2012. They're still in consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They have to submit the application for a 401 water quality certification to the California Regional Water Quality Control Board. On the final map, they have to do additional boundary surveys on the western property line. So it seems to me, see if you agree, it's fair to say that while a lot of work was done towards obtaining these permits prior to 2009, but expired, and very little, if anything, has been done since then. Is that fair?
It is a fair description. Staff is very aware that in most cases, the timing of things like wetlands permits, streambed alteration agreements, and studies can be very constrained. Most of these studies really only have a shelf life of 24 months. And one of the unique things about this project that you don't see as much anymore was at the time the project was approved, these things were described as being project conditions and mitigating measures to complete after project approval. And I believe that reflected an understanding on everybody's part that these studies, they take a long time to do, but then they expire very, very quickly. The applicant did what they could at the time to complete them. As the project didn't go forward, they expired. They don't have to go all the way back to square one. They have a certain amount of data. There's a little bit of field work that's going to need to be updated. They can go back out and do these studies, and it's not an unexpected happenstance for a development of this size. You know, the timing is very nuanced, and when studies only have a shelf life of 24 months, that can happen, and it does.
The applicant wrote that the drought made processing the final map impractical. Why would that be so?
That would be a question that I think the applicant would have to respond to.
Okay, what is
It can
this?
complicate biological studies. You know, sometimes if there has been a period of extended drought, a regulatory agency will require more extensive studies and additional study seasons in order to make sure their data is good.
What is the situation with access to this project? Because it looks like it's Little John, which goes through a residential neighborhood to get to Tuscany Hills. And is there an alternative to Little John? And if not, what is the proposal to
Now,
make the access better than what it is? Because it is not very good.
forgive my scribbles here. This was just some of the notes that I was taking. Tuscany Hills and Oak Canyon Ranch, at the time they were processed, were considered to be non-growth inducing. And a large part of that had to do with the fact that all of the internal roads were closed loops. For Tuscany Hills, at the time it was submitted, the access was Little John Road, and that was the only access with a series of interior closed loops. During the processing of this map, the issues were raised about excessive length of cul-de-sac and secondary access. And it's my understanding that there was an extensive amount of debate about that. But what we see in the final approval documents and reflected in the minutes, they were not required at the time, specifically for Tuscany Hills, to construct a secondary access. Little John Road itself actually has a right-of-way of some 80 feet, which is actually very difficult to see when you get to the far southern end of the roadway because of the encroachment of driveways up to edge of pavement and slope issues and so on and so forth. But Little John Road itself was deemed to be of an adequate right-of-way to construct this. Project conditions were added by Public Works as part of the map approval itself, and they're very nuanced. They're very difficult to read. I've included a reference to what the mitigating conditions were, but they say no more than at this end, where the road was supposed to end in a loop with a cul-de-sac, please reconstruct this road, you know, to that 80-foot wide template, extending all the way through the Court 20, extending B Road through Court 20 and all the way to the property boundary, so that in future it would serve as an additional way out when subsequent development followed. The same condition was put on J Road, and Court 1 was that the through road be revised to serve as a through road with an easement that projected all the way to the property boundary so they could leave. The project has always included a way out onto Pueblo Court at this end of the development. There was not a corresponding condition that required that these additional off-site roads be constructed prior to development of this map, but just with the recordation of the final map and with the development of the project, the ability be left so that there could be other future exits out of the development.
Well, since that was all done, were there houses built along Little John Road at the southern end that were not there when the EIR was approved?
Given how few new homes have been developed in the Copper Cove area, I don't believe so. That's not a question that we have researched. We have not seen a substantial increase in development of residences in that neck of the woods.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? If not, I'm going to go to the applicant and let them... We'll go to the applicant now and let them have their 15-minute presentation time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Tom Hicks. I'm with Red Mountain Resorts LLC. We've owned the property for nearly 20 years. As you all know, living in this county, the economy up here has changed quite a bit over that period of time. The Commissioner mentioned Oak Canyon. We're pretty close with the folks who bought Oak Canyon, and as Deborah knows, they haven't finally processed that, but it looks like that project's going to go away. We've worked very closely with CCWD. We have an excellent relationship with them. In fact, we gave them the easement to construct a new drawdown on Lake Tulloch. We're also working with them, and we haven't formally processed this, but a separate entrance road through the CCWD property, which would resolve some of the issues on Little John Road. We would come back after this extension and revise those conditions in the map. But we're confident that we can resolve any of those issues, and CCWD has been excellent to work with. With respect to the water, as Deborah mentioned, their current rate is 6,000. They don't ever see, with the development plans that are in existence today, ever going over 4,000. So there's plenty of water available with CCWD. Like I said, we have an excellent relationship with them. Any other questions I'm happy to answer. With respect to the timing here, we had our map approved in July of 2007. As you all recall, shortly after that is when we had a disastrous economy that led to really changes in the entire development business all over the country, not let alone this area here. Saddle Creek and many of the other developments all had put everything on hold. So, there was a lot of planned development in this area. I think the county has designated this portion of the county to be the development area to preserve some of the areas of Murphy's and some of the other areas in the county. This is a logical place for development in the county. The infrastructure is there. On the northern border of our property is the CCWD plant for water and sewer, so it's really no increase in public improvements that need to be made to develop the site. So the economy slowed down until well into 2011, 2012 before you could really do anything. With respect to the studies, as you mentioned, we did everything we could before the market just totally tanked up here. We're ready to, we have all our financing in place. We're ready to proceed with the studies. We'll update our core study. We plan to remove quite a few of the holes of the 18-hole golf course. We're not going to be doing that now. We're allowed to do that under the code here. So it'll be a much reduced golf course plan. So the water issue should be even less water than was anticipated in our approvals back in 2007. So happy to answer any other questions you may have.
I didn't understand exactly what you said about Oak Hill Canyon.
Oak Canyon Ranch?
Oak Canyon?
Right.
Okay. I didn't understand if you said it's in the process of going away or exactly what you...
Well, I don't know if they made their formal application. It was purchased by the rancher that ranched that property for many, many years. My understanding is they're working at an arrangement out with the open space community to make the majority of that property open space. So they have no plans to develop the 3,000 odd units that they were approved for. So.
And your reduced golf course plan, which sounds like a great way of preserving...
Yeah, the golf market's changed dramatically.
Well, and also, I'm thinking of the water use right now.
Absolutely.
And that's in the process of...
That's in the process. We'll come back after this extension with a revised map that's consistent with our map, and we've worked with Peter and Deborah on that, and we'll maintain the consistency of our approval. But we'll come back with revisions that'll be more environmentally sensitive, and that's why one of the reasons we've held off for going back and doing our new wetlands delineation, because if you're familiar with the property, the golf course that was designed was down in the lows. That's where all the wetland issues were, and they're just, seasonal stream beds is all they are. But those will all go away. So we anticipate we'll be available to qualify for a nationwide permit, which is less than a half acre of disturbed wetland. So.
And you say you'll be coming back with a revised map. Is that something that will then go through the planning commission? Okay.
Yes.
I'm very encouraged to hear the reduced size of the golf course.
Thank you.
What's
Any
your
other questions?
timing, expected timing on this revised map?
Well, we obviously had to wait till our extension was done here, but we're working on it now. We would anticipate to probably submit that in the next 6 months. We're working on it.
Is there a reason you haven't done it before today?
We have to have the extension. We started working on it before we met with Peter and Deborah previously, but we felt that with the changes that we needed, it made more sense to get the extension and have the time to do it because of the studies. And as Deborah said, most of the life of the 404 and those permits only have a 24-month period. So you want to wait and do those when you're ready to start your construction. So,
Sounds like a chicken and egg situation.
well, always is in this business.
What sort of modification in the water demand from the golf course would you expect?
Oh, it'd definitely go down for sure.
50%, 10%?
Probably every bit of that, if not more.
Every bit of,
50% or more.
50%.
Yeah.
and you said that you've done a lot of studies before the market tanked. Have you done any studies since 2010?
No, because again, as Deborah mentioned, those studies have a short life to them. And so until you're ready to start construction, we were, the economy in this part of the country didn't really start turning around until 2014.
So on this expenditure chart, table 3 shows $1.5 million expended since 2007.
That's correct.
Is most or all of that done prior to the 2010 period?
Most of it, yeah, because we were still bullish and we didn't know how long the recession was going to last, but it lasted a lot longer than anyone anticipated.
It's unclear to me right now the ownership situation. I mean,
Yeah.
you're the folks that have been here for 20 years,
That's correct.
and are you passing the
We
baton?
had a lender, and what we've done is the lender has turned into a partner with us, and Travis Huff is here today, so he's basically taken the loan off the property and became an equity partner with us.
So you and your organization will
We're still in-
continue?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Any other questions?
Yes. Are you still planning on 335 homes?
Yeah, but probably what we'll do in our reconfiguration is make the lots smaller. We pretty much see this market as really more of an active adult market. That's why we're reducing the golf course. So we'll probably make the lots smaller and the homes will be smaller than, the 2007 marketplace was much, much different than it is today, demographically and everything else. So we anticipate decreasing the size of the lots and making the homes that will be built there smaller than what we anticipated. So again, water demand for that would go down as well. So.
What about the access? Is it still going to be Little John all the way to the property boundary?
Well, we had a successful board meeting with CCWD to create access through CCWD property, which would come in before where Little John tightens up a little bit, just past Saddle Creek's maintenance yard, and turn into the property at that point and come through. CCWD owns 430 acres, I think it is, back there, and come through that property. CCWD has approved that. We'd have to process that with the county. We've done the environmental study on that parcel for the road alignment there, and it came out very positive. So we'll have to do a quick wetland delineation on that area. But they've been very supportive, and they like that alignment. That eliminates some of the difficulty in approving the required improvements on Little John Road, because we'd be taking nearly everybody's driveway out, and it just didn't make any sense. So that would be the primary access point, and then Little John would be your secondary access. So it's a much better situation. We've met with fire. They like it as well. And so I think it's a much improved access point from what we have today.
If
Well,
you
you'd
look at the
still
map,
use- go ahead.
the CCWD lands are the bright blue.
Yeah, exactly.
That's immediately to the north of Tuscany Hills.
And that, you anticipate that road would be indicated on your revised map?
That would be part of our revised map. That's correct.
Is this 3-year extension the last of the extensions that you have available?
Yes, it is.
That's correct.
Have you considered a shorter extension in order to come in with the revised plan? And then have that reconsidered? Maybe that's a staff question, I'm sorry.
It is a staff question. Policy in the planning department has generally been for parcel maps that are much smaller in scale. We're allowing a 2-year extension of time, and 4 tentative subdivision tract maps, giving them the 3. The way state law is written, this is all he gets, apart from all of the extensions of time that came about as a result of Senate bills and Assembly bills, which seem to have ceased at this point. He is allowed a total life of 6 years, and he had the initial 36 months, and now he's getting the remaining 36 months.
But won't we have to actually review the revised plan?
That is a separate process. He would either move forward through the modification of existing permit process, or he would go through a determination of substantial conformance on the map that he brings in. It's going to be very dependent on what he proposes, as proposed right now with a new section of roadway through CCWD lands. That would certainly have to be addressed through the modification of existing permit process. And all we could do would be to process that as quickly as we can when we receive it.
And that would come through us then?
Yes.
Are there any further questions for the applicant? If not, I'd like to go to public comment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody here that has any public comment on this particular project? Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Colleen Platt with MyValleySprings.com and the Calaveras Planning Coalition. We just have some brief comments here, nothing formal or written. We are concerned about the possible over-allocation of water supply in the Copper area, the changes in the water that we've learned about in the last 10 years since this project has been completed. The state knows there's changes. Everybody knows that permits are on paper. Permits are not actually in the ground and in the water supply. There's been changes to the actual water supply in the last 10 years. So we are concerned about the possible over-allocation of water supply and the possible inadequacy of the project environmental review due to that, the changes that we've learned in the last 10 years. Let me see, so I'm reading my notes here. I think has been mentioned before, possibly by the planner or some other comments, during the drought, Numa Lones was drastically drawn down, and Lake Tulloch was also drawn down, and CCWD did extend their pipes down deeper to put the supply down into the dead pool, or whatever they want to call it. But that just shows you the water is not there that we thought was there. In the EIR, there was also the mention that the water rights were over-allocated. The cumulative impact to the water supply was a significant and unavoidable impact. And we understand the figures that Deborah has given us about 6,000 acre feet is their permit. But the EIR did point out that all of the growth in the area could possibly lead to over 7,000 acre feet. So that was explained away by saying, well, they would just go to the state and get a new permit for more water. The state is not necessarily going to issue new permits for more water when there really isn't more water. So I think that is a substantial fact that should be considered, is that permits are not automatically issued for more water just because you have the rights. Having the water rights does not equal having the water, and having the water rights does not equal getting the water permits for those rights. The state controls all that, and we've learned a lot in the last 10 years, and especially the last 4 or 5 years of drought. So I think there's some new information that should be considered for environmental impact reports on the project. Let me see if there's anything else. I'm also concerned about our practice of not issuing will serve letters. Evidently, there's a Senate Bill 600 that says that will serve letters must subtract from the water supply, what the development will use. But since CCWD does not issue will serve letters when the tentative map is issued, they don't issue those letters. So they're not really subtracting that from the water supply. It's kind of like, we have issued all of these subdivision maps, tentative subdivision maps, without actually addressing all of those, whether CCW will serve them. They won't issue those letters till they're ready to be constructed. So I think that's another kind of a weak area. So do we really know if water has been determined or guaranteed for all of the cumulative impacts and all of the developments that are allowed and are potentially in this area? The new draft land use map, I think that was up there briefly. I'm not sure if that's what it is, but I know there were new areas approved for development in the new draft land use map, and I don't know that those have been looked at all at this point. There were some areas that were converted from natural resource lands to future development, so that's another water impact that we should look at. Let me see. I think that's basically it. I'm just concerned that water rights and water permits do not equal water supply. That's not actual water supply that we have. And that the EIR may be actually underestimated in water supply. There's been changes in the last 10 years of the knowledge of our water. Increase in water permits is dubious. Changes in growth projections for the county over the last 10 years, that have changed. There's been access issues that have changed. The plans, obviously, for access and roads have changed. Revisions to the map have occurred, so those all seem like substantial changes to us that could generate a need for new environmental study instead of just a recycled EIR with a revised map attached to it. So that's kind of our input on that. Thank you. And maybe Deborah can address some of these questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and respond. We do not have a revised map. I think at the end of your presentation, Pauline, you said...
I'm sorry. Can we just finish public comment first,
okay.
and then we'll go to rebuttal? I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Is there any other further public comment? Okay. We're going to close public comment now, and then now we'll go back to rebuttal with you.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
We are not considering a new map at this time. The action that you're taking today does not include any revisions to a map. Should the applicant come in with a modification of an existing permit, a full CEQA review would be done at that time.
I'm sorry, could I stop you right there? You really woke me up then. With a revised map, a full CEQA review will be done
Yes,
at that time?
Well, I'd like to clarify that. We would rely on the existing EIR to the extent it's still applicable to whatever revisions are proposed. If we find that the revisions bring up new issues, then we may have to do a supplemental or a subsequent EIR or some other addendum or some other document to, depending on the extent of the changes and the extent of potential environmental impacts that weren't addressed in the original EIR.
But would you consider at that point the changes in the environmental facts that have occurred since 2007?
Yes, they would need to be looked at.
Because, I could see looking at it and saying, well, they're reducing the water use, so the old EIR is just fine. I just question. A full environmental review might come up with things that the first one did not, other than the fact that we don't have as much water as we thought we did.
Okay, I'm going to let her finish her rebuttal if that's okay. Thank you.
Sorry, that was clarification.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
With regard to the new draft land use map, I would say I would disagree with Colleen's suggestion that this is indicating new areas of approval that would not have been included in the 2007 analysis. The CCWD looked at two scenarios. One was build out of existing and planned developments, and the other was build out of the master plan future service area. And it is the planning department's understanding that this master plan future service area includes those other developments. For instance, the changed area in the vicinity of Coppertown Square and Sawmill Lake, these are all part of CCWD's master plan, and they have been for some time. You know, obviously, as has Oak Canyon Ranch. So I don't see that there has been a substantial difference in areas to be served between 2007 and now.
I'm sorry, yes?
Could I just mention the areas around Tabletop Mountain, all those areas?
Okay.
To the
That's not
to the east.
necessarily a point of order.
Okay. I'm
That's
sorry.
comment, thank you.
sorry.
And I would say we do not currently have applications in hand for developments like that. That's not currently a development that's being processed by the planning department. I would say that would just have to be in the realm of speculation right now. We can't take into consideration too many people's hopes and dreams for the future in greater planning areas that haven't been rolled into our general plan and for which we have not yet received an application. I think I'm missing some of her points. As far as a will serve letter, CCWD has never issued will serve letters. It's a point that has always been a point of contention between planning and CCWD. They do not consider the water to be consumed and allocated until it's bought and paid for. And they do have that process in place, and that process is their facilities agreement, which takes place it does not take place at the tentative map stage. It takes place between the tentative map and recordation of the final map. So there's always been a timing issue out there. It only shows up as being a problem when, for instance, specifically in the Copperopolis area, when we had this thing that appeared to be a land rush, when the developers for Oak Canyon Ranch appeared on the scene, and Tuscany appeared on the scene, and Copper Valley Ranch appeared on the scene, and it would have appeared that CCWD was giving away the same water over and over again. But as I said, they don't do the will serve. They don't allocate the water for a development that they have no idea whether it's going to go forward or not in the next decade. They wait until the developer is able to pay for it, and then it's allocated.
Okay. Do you have any other further rebuttal?
I probably missed something, but no.
Any other questions of clarification?
You know, just one. Tell me again, because I'm not sure I fully understand it, how the process for requiring, if you will, or approving the new access road through CWD's property is going to happen.
That would be considered as a major change, not envisioned and addressed in the earlier permit documents or the environmental review documents. That is the modification of existing permit process. He would be applying for a modification to the tentative map and whatever else he would need in the way of land use entitlements to allow that road to be constructed through CCWD property. Obviously, there is a footprint that extends beyond the boundaries that were analyzed in the first go-round, so we know there'll be a new area of disturbance there, and then at that time, he would certainly submit whatever interior changes that he is proposing in the way of smaller golf courses, smaller lots, slightly different project layout, things that are not, these additional things, if they're not in close enough consistency with what was previously approved, that we can make a determination of conformance, we have to reconsider in the context of the modification of the existing permit.
Well, what if anything would require the developer to go through that process in lieu of simply saying, well, I know the access isn't really great through Little John the way it sits, but that's what I'm going to do anyway?
Well, that's the whole point of the approval of a tentative map. It is a vested right at that point in time. And so in 2007, when the county approved that project, they gave him the right to move forward with that project if he can satisfy all those conditions. So there's nothing that requires him to modify his access.
Okay, so then the only way to make sure that that access does get modified so it would be acceptable would be to deny this map extension. Is that correct?
That's correct. If you felt that the original approval of that project was in error or was a bad decision, you have that right to not extend the map.
I think you have to look at the standards for map extensions that, that's, I don't think it's about re-examining the project. It's about looking at whether or not a map extension was in good, whether the work done was in good faith under the existing ordinance.
Not sure that's correct.
Are there any further questions? Okay, I'd like to have the applicant, if you'd like to come up and do any rebuttal on public comment or...
Commissioner, with respect to the road, we fully intend on pursuing that, and, we believe that's a much better access than what's there today. We'll have to go through that process, but we can't go through that if we don't have an extension in the map. So, hopefully you will approve our extension so that we can go through that process. So I agree with you. I think there should be changes to the access, but that's why we haven't pursued the one that's there today. So, thank you.
Does anybody have any more questions? If not, okay, then I'm going to close the hearing and bring it back to the commissioners for deliberation, and thank you. I guess I'll start. I think that they've put a good faith effort forward based on what they were told to do. They have expended a lot of money in moving this project forward. Deborah, I want to thank you for a really, really great presentation. It was very informative, and thank you.
You're welcome.
On the water, if you were following what CCWD was doing with the drain down, because this is a lot of concerns for people, on Lake Tulloch, they didn't allow water downstream to fill Lake Tulloch intentionally because they were going to be working on the water lines in that dead pole area. So yes, that lake was low, but it was an intentional drawdown. The water for that lake, obviously water runs downhill, was stored upstream. So I'm not concerned with the water issues. I did talk to CCWD. I think that when it comes to the water issues, those are issues, and a lot of the questions that were brought up today, I think should be held, and those public comments should go to a CCWD meeting. That's where those questions need to be addressed, because they're the ones holding the answers. They're responsible for their approvals. I'm in full support of giving them the 3 years. Obviously, if they're going to do drastic changes, some of them sound much better than the plan from 2007 as far as the roads, the lot sizes. Being that I'm in the real estate industry, I understand what you're saying about the elder community, looking at different size homes compared to where we were at in 2007. I think that the model, they've done their homework. So I am in support of the 3-year extension. If they do too many drastic changes, obviously a lot of more reports, EIRs, a lot of modeling is going to have to be looked at, cultural, biological, everything's going to have to be reassessed. Working with CCWD is great as far as getting the road redrawn through there. And I think if the changes are too drastic, obviously it's been stated it'll come back here before us to look at. But they were given the go-ahead, and they have followed the rules, and I just can't see punishing somebody going forward if they're still going to comply with what's out there and needs to be complied with, and that's my position.
Well, one of the questions is not what the applicant has done or not done, but what has Mother Nature done or not done. And I am somewhat reassured by Deborah's report that the dire news of the 2007 EIR is still dire news, but it was actually anticipating the eventual drain down that would be required in all the developments that would be happening in this area that CCWD would need to be supplying. I'm heartened by the applicant's presentation today. The golf courses are a remarkable sucking source of water supply, and I think we have a great example of where the market is actually helping the environment in this respect, and that the market is saying no, not such We don't need such big lots to be landscaped. We don't need a golf course to draw that much water. I think with an amended map, which perhaps I'm naive, but I'm taking the applicant at his word that this is what makes sense to them right now, that they need to amend the map to show the new access route and the revised development itself. I think that all put together should require a new environmental impact report, which is where I came into this controversy, thinking that I'm very uncomfortable relying on a 2009 environmental impact report. I think it would be unreasonable for us to require a revised environmental impact report on the project as it exists on paper today when there's going to be major changes to that project. But I do think that we would need.
I want to clarify something I said. When we were talking, the project is a discretionary map extension, and the standards for that are listed in the ordinance. It is because it is a discretionary project. I did not mean to imply that we don't look at CEQA. We do look at CEQA, and so I do think that if the commission did believe that there was enough new information requiring recirculation, that would be a proper basis for denial if that's what the commission believed. I didn't want to exclude CEQA from the discussion, but I don't think that if we're literally just looking beyond CEQA at whether we like the project, that would fit with the idea of an extension. So I wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
Thank you. And anyhow, I'm prepared on the assurances by the applicant. I'm prepared to vote for the 3-year extension. I think we have to assume that the 6 years, was it 6 years that the state gave, just are non-existent years, that we don't have to see that they were doing everything possible within those 6 years to advance this project. So I'm prepared to vote in favor of it based on the presentation of the applicant today and on Deborah's fine presentation. I do think that just the fact that this is a matter for CCWD, and maybe I should go to a CCWD meeting, I think the reverse is, this is a very clear indication of what a key player CCWD is in it, and I think CCWD ought to be here next time when we're talking about water supply.
The water supply is important, and I think this is what should be situation, what should be examined as a regional approach to this whole thing, but that's not for us to do anything about today. I would assume Tuolumne County might have some input, for example, and I have all sorts of questions about these 3 sources of water, and yet we're only looking at one source. Are there transfer pipes? All sorts of issues. But I do think in the bottom line we need to go in the 3 years. I at first came here this morning thinking just a 1-year type of thing, but in light of the amount of work's going to have to be done to modify this, which it looks like it's necessary, I'd go with the 3 years at this point.
I have a concern about the EIR, but I also came in this morning thinking that 3 years was too much. We keep giving 3 years, 3 years, 3 years. I'd like to see the new plans. The lot sizing kind of impressed me a little bit. So I'm kind of wavering back and forth. I guess I'll have to agree with 3 years today.
You know, a cup of coffee?
Yes.
I do.
We're going to have a break in just a minute. Commissioner Wooster?
Based on what I've heard today, I'm prepared to vote for this 3-year extension. On the water issue, I mean, we've had droughts before, 1976, 1977. This is not new. We have the whole Stanislaus River watershed feeding New Maloney's, which stores like 1,400,000 acre-feet when it's full. Tulloch is just a small storage area, basically for the irrigation districts. And so if Maloney's has water, Tulloch's going to have water. I was concerned about the access. I still am, but I'm taking Mr. Hicks at his word that they're going to work and establish an alternative route, which I think needs to be done. So I'm prepared to support it.
Okay. Rebecca, would you, sorry, Deborah, would you like to read the recommendation, please?
Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2017-81, approving a 3-year extension of time for the approved tentative subdivision tract map 2001-154 for the Tuscany Hills project, based upon the findings included therein and subject to the conditions previously approved.
Thank you. Are there any corrections on the resolution? Everybody's good?
I have a suggested change, couple of suggested changes. On number 1, on the basis of the whole record there, and I would insert the word currently. Currently is no substantial evidence. And under evidence, in the last sentence of that evidence paragraph, I'd say that there are no currently apparent changes in circumstances.
That didn't work for me on your evidence.
Okay.
I mean, I can go
Well,
with
I
it
have a
on
hard
number
time-
1, but on the evidence, it's
Well, I
just,
have to say straight out, there are no changes in circumstances that would necessitate revisions to. I'm not sure that that's the case, and so for my yes vote, I want to have a little fudge factor in that, to be absolutely honest.
okay, I'm going to poll the commissioners. How's that? Would you like to add the word currently to both the evidence and item number 1?
Well, on the second sentence,
Second sentence.
it's currently apparent changes.
I'd agree.
Okay?
I just want to caution the commission that I believe this is a mandatory finding under CEQA. And I think you do need to project into the future on the extension of time, whether the extension of time will necessitate revisions. I don't want to dilute a mandatory CEQA finding.
No, we're still saying there's no substantial evidence. but-
So Mr., if we could have just a minute for Mr. Mauer to look up he has the book in front of him.
And my second suggestion is to the evidence, which is not part of the finding.
Is that the only changes you had?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, did anybody else have any changes?
No.
Okay. Do you want us to take a break while you look that up, or do you want to?
It's up to you.
No, it's how long do you think it'll take? If he needs a 15-minute break, we'll take it. You turned your mic off.
I guess my question is whether current is the word you really want. Apparent makes sense, but I mean,
Okay,
you know-
if there is no apparent substantial evidence?
I don't think it's necessary, but if it makes you feel better,
It makes me feel better. Because we have not been presented with any substantial evidence. I don't want to say there's no substantial evidence, because there may be substantial evidence out there we haven't been presented with.
Well, the finding starts by saying, on the basis of the whole record, there is no substantial evidence. I'm not in favor of including the word apparent or the word current or anything like it. That's what it is.
I agree, that's 2.
Well-
And the 3 of you want to add it, correct?
I'm good with not adding it.
Oh,
And I think Commissioner Wooster has made me much more comfortable by saying, on the basis of the whole record. Now, what about under the evidence, we're not bound by, I would like to say there are no apparent changes in circumstances in the evidence. And that's not a required finding, that's evidence supporting, so.
I mean, I'm okay with that.
Just to confirm, that is the last sentence in the evidence paragraph for number 1, and it would state, there are no apparent changes in circumstance.
That's correct.
Thank you. Quick poll, you're all okay with those changes?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then can we get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve it.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a 15-minute break. I don't know. You ready? Okay. All right, we'll bring the meeting back to order, and we are going to start with item number 2 for Dixie Lee Adams. And Gina, you doing that presentation? No?
Yes, trying to make room, sorry. Okay, let's see. All right, next item on the agenda is a lot of entitlements, but it's not too complicated. We're talking about a general plan amendment, zoning amendment, conditional use permit, and a plan development for Miss Dixie Lee Adams. Parcels located in McCollum Hill at 8295 Main Street. Just to kind of give you a familiar view, this is the building that we're speaking of from the view from the street. It is the, previously it was the McCollum Hill Fire District's fire station. So the proposal is to convert the existing building that once was a fire station to a commercial structure for the purpose of operating a retail store and a beer and wine bar. In addition, the applicant is asking for approval of a planned development permit for proposed exterior changes to the existing building in conformance with the McCollum Hill design guidelines. So we're going to just break this down and take them each entitlement at a time. So we'll begin with the general plan amendment. Currently, the general plan is designated through the McCollum Hill community plan, designated as public service. And that was done so because at the time, obviously the fire district owned the parcel, and that was home of the McCollum Hill Fire Department. The proposal is to change the land use designation from public service to commercial, and that is for the purpose of the zoning amendment that will be following. Compatible zoning in the commercial land use designation as illustrated or designated through the community plan currently is highway service, CP, which is professional office, RC, which is rural commercial, C1, which is local commercial, and C2, general commercial. Just to kind of give you an idea of where we're headed, because we all know that we're still in the general plan update process. As you folks are fully aware, we have approved the land use map, but obviously have not gotten completely through the process and the certification of the EIR. So technically, the general plan update is not officially adopted, but your wishes and the board's wishes in respect to the land use map has been approved. So as of to date, since the board approval of the land use map, this parcel or this area in McCollum Hill is slated to be designated a new land use designation called Historic Center. Compatible zoning within this designation is likely to be C1, CP, RC, in addition to R1, which is single-family residential, and R2, which is two-family residential. Up on the screen is a current copy of or illustration of the general plan map, as seen as in the community plan. I am going to point out one small error in that in your packet, I actually pointed to the incorrect parcel. And I'm going to explain how that happened in just a moment. So the parcel in question is actually, I believe, right here. And it's adjacent to the town hall. The town hall building is also designated public service. If you'll notice, the parcel directly north of the town hall, there's the town hall, that's the subject parcel. It actually shows up on the community plan map as commercial. Thought that was really odd. When we originally talked to the applicant, we accepted her zoning amendment application. Thought it was very odd that the adjacent parcel to the north was actually designated public service, but in fact zoned commercial. So we accepted her zoning amendment application, not really thinking much about it, did a little bit further investigation and found that we actually mapped this incorrectly. So Peter and I did a more extensive review and actually counted the parcels and come to find out that we actually just illustrated it incorrectly on the map. In fact, the subject parcel is designated public service, unlike how it's depicted on the map itself. So the next entitlement that she'll need is a zoning amendment. So currently the zoning is public service, and that was applied to the parcel for the purpose of the appropriate zoning for the previous fire district or fire department use of that building. So as indicated here, classify lands that are used for public purposes, public utilities, and public agencies. So again, the public service zone was very appropriate for the previous use of a fire department. The applicant has proposed to amend the zoning to C2, general commercial, which is in fact a compatible zoning in the current land use designation, but is not a compatible zoning in the general plan update historic center designation. And the reason why she chose C2 was basically because the C2 zone allows all of her proposed uses outright as permitted. So that would permit the retail use that she's proposing as well as the beer and wine bar without need of further review. Upon our analysis and review of the application, staff is actually making a recommendation not to approve C2 zoning, but in fact downzone it to a C1, which we find it has more compatibility with the surrounding area. We'll get into that just a little bit more. The retail uses in a C1 zone are permitted outright. However, the beer and wine bar that she's proposing will be a conditional use. This map illustrates the current zoning in McCollum Hill. So all of this gray color here that you see throughout is single-family residential, R1. The yellow color is our C1 local commercial zoning. We do have a little pocket over here. This happens to be the park, which is zoned recreation. And then we have a couple sparsely zoned parcels of C2. Oddly enough, this one's actually got a split land use designation of C1 and C2. Not exactly sure. I do believe it's actually a residence, but oddly enough, we do have some incompatible zoning, as I've stated in the report. Oddly enough, we've got commercial uses on residentially zoned parcels. We've got the hotel just across the street, which does have a separate bar area that would normally not be permitted in a C1 zone, is actually zoned C1. We've got the town hall, which has got a split designation of single-family residential and public service. So there's kind of some inconsistencies, some things we can't really explain that are going on out there. But in fact, we don't want to complicate matters and create any further confusion. So, hopefully our recommendation will actually be beneficial to the community. So just kind of a quick comparison of the two zones. The local commercial C1 zone is intended for small-scale retail service businesses Those businesses are intended to meet the local needs of your community areas. And they are for the purpose of locating in close proximity to residential neighborhoods. Again, the retail uses that are proposed would be permitted. However, the beer and wine bar could be permitted with approval of a conditional use permit. On the other side, C2 zone is really an intensive general commercial use. So a little more intensive commercial uses are allowed. In fact, most of the C1, conditionally permitted C1 uses are permitted outright in the C2 zone, which again would permit the retail uses as well as the beer and wine bar without any further discretion. So because staff feels that there's an incompatibility with the C2 zone in this specific location in the community, we feel that a conditional use is warranted. So we actually went through and made findings with a few conditions to approve a conditional use permit in the event that you want to accept our recommendation. The conditional use permit actually allows the public opportunity to further address potential conflicts with uses associated with that specific zoning. So they're seen as maybe having conflicts with the neighboring land use and zoning, not necessarily that they're incompatible, it's just that they might propose a conflict that needs to be further addressed. Because of the close proximity of the residential neighborhood, specifically directly behind the subject lot is a residence zoned R1, as is all of the parcels on that back street. There's residential zoning across the street, up the street, on both sides, and that's very close. That's very close proximity to your commercial uses, and staff just feels that there's like I said, a potential for conflict that needs to be addressed if in fact we would consider that C2 zone. So with that, we determined that simply by placing hours of limitation to the beer and wine bar, in addition to confining the use within the building, that would eliminate any potential conflicts it may have with the surrounding residential neighborhood. What we have now is the plan development, and as you've heard in previous Planning Commission hearings, and I'm sure understand, there is a historic center designation that is applied to a good portion of McCollum Hill, and it's signified with a PD combining zone, which allows the county to address aesthetics in conformance with the guidelines, the design guidelines that have been adopted through the community plan. And that is obviously for the preservation of historic integrity and to maintain the historic atmosphere of the community. As said before, we do have adopted guidelines to follow, which we have addressed many times before, criteria in respect to size, scale, massing, sitting of structures, as well as other criteria can be analyzed. The proposed exterior changes are pretty minor, but still, in fact, they are changes. The applicant proposes four additional windows to be placed into the building, and she will be eliminating two of the existing windows. I'll show you on the next slide what that looks like. In addition, there's a roll-up door in the front of the building. Obviously, it was used as a fire district. They needed to get the fire engines out of that building quickly. She's proposing to, within that existing opening, take out that door and replace it with a new 8-foot roll-up door in addition to a walk-through door. She wants to help maintain that historic features by adding a transom window as well as what they're calling an eyebrow overhang. Here's the south elevation, or the left side. As you see, the four windows in the middle are the new addition. The 2 windows on the outside will be eliminated. The applicant actually installed those windows prior to getting a building permit. I think there was some confusion as to what we needed, but nevertheless, they were installed. Once she realized that she needed a permit, she halted construction, came right into us, applied for her permits for the plan development. At this point, we engaged an informal committee, and you're all aware that there is a historical society committee that has gathered numerous times to assist individuals through the process of a plan development and trying to find conformancy with those design guidelines. And so they basically met on site, they've taken a look at the plans, they've spoken to the applicant, and with some corrections, minor corrections, in the particular case of the windows, they actually recommended that the windows get framed out in wood because they currently are metal, which is inconsistent with the historic guidelines. But if we simply frame those windows in wood, they would be satisfied, and that they would be more conforming to the existing windows and the historic character of the community. Here's a drawing showing what the finished windows will somewhat appear to be. Moving on to the front elevation. Again, here's the same picture as shown before. The existing metal door will be replaced with a smaller roll-up door, similar in fashion, and I've tried to find some pictures to kind of give you an idea of what we think that might look like. But again, the committee has had extensive discussions with the applicant, and they seem to be quite happy with what she's proposing. So within this existing opening, there will be replaced a new 8-foot door along with the walk-through door, and again, the transom over the walk-through door with an eyebrow overhang, looking something like this. Kind of went through and tried to find some features that might resemble what the applicant is proposing, and if I am way off, I am sure she's going to be telling me right away. But this is kind of what I've envisioned based on on our discussion and what it was described in the application and the letters provided to us by the committee. This is a picture of the exact door frame that she's already purchased for the walk-through door. In relation to CEQA, we found a categorical exemption based on the conversion of small structures from one use to another, in addition to minor modifications being made to the exterior of the building. This is really a minor project. The general plan is consistent with the community itself and the surrounding land uses. The proposed, the recommended zoning is consistent with not only the general plan as well as the general plan update. We find it more compatible with the surrounding zoning of C1 in that general area, in addition to compatibility with the residential neighborhood. Under a conditional use permit, the wine and beer bar can be approved with the findings that we've made and the 2 conditions that we've placed upon the use. And the plan development for exterior changes is consistent with the design guidelines, as been reviewed by staff as well as the local committee of somewhat expertise. So our recommendation is that you approve the general plan amendment, allow the zoning, approve the findings and conditions for the conditional use permit to allow the beer and wine bar, in addition to approving the plan development permit to allow the exterior changes to the building.
I do have some questions, but I should start right off in case there's any suspense in the room, saying that this looks like a great plan. And I'm certainly ready to go ahead with what the county's recommending. But I do have questions, and one is, now the McCullum Hill Community Plan that we're talking about is the McCullum Hill Community Plan that is going to be a part of the new general plan, is that correct? Or is this an existing one that existing
No,
under the
so
current?
when I speak of the McCallum Hill Community Plan, it is the existing community plan.
Okay,
So currently, the community plan calls out several different designations. In the under the commercial designation, they call out a number of compatible zoning, which is 1C1 in addition to C2.
So-
The difference being is that the general plan update in the historic center that you folks have already said, this is what we want to go forward with, eliminates that C2 zoning, so it kind of creates
So,
more of
but-
an inconsistency with that
but
community.
we're amending, the plan is to amend the general plan, the existing
The
general plan.
existing, correct.
And based on what's in the existing McCullum
Right.
Hill.
So the applicant cannot move forward with her plans for, opening her shop and even completing the exterior changes without going through this process. So she has to have the commercial zoning in order to move forward with her business and her plans to, to further develop this
Right.
site. But she can't get to the commercial zoning unless we amend the general plan.
Yeah, I
As
understand.
crazy as that seems, knowing that we've already kind of, we're through this whole update process, but until it's actually certified and adopted by the board, we still have,
Right, okay,
this
now
current
it
plan.
makes sense. The C1 versus C2.
Yes.
As I understand it, the C1 with the proposals that the county is making today would give the applicant everything she wants currently for the use of the property.
correct.
And it's just that if we were to give a C2 designation, then if she were to sell the property, the new buyer could say, well, gee, we still have an 8-foot roll-up door, I can have a car repair place
Well,
here.
exactly, and that was our
And
biggest
they would-
fear
They would
is-
not, they would not have to come
Right.
to the county or anything, just they can start
Right.
repairing cars.
Right, so the conditional uses in a C1 zone are, for the most part, permitted in C2. So where you would have the ability to address a use through a conditional use permit at some time in the future, in the C1 zone, you wouldn't have that ability in the C2 zone, it would just be automatically permitted. And even if one was to come through, like say for instance with the plan development permit, maybe they were, going to take a look at, maybe they were proposing some additional exterior changes. That wouldn't necessarily allow us to address the specific use of the property.
Right.
We would only be able to address the changes to the building itself. So here again, if you allowed C2, then you would be accepting all of the uses allowed in C2 outright as written in code currently.
Okay, thank you.
Do any other commissioners have clarifying questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, the applicant is here. Would you like to come up and give your presentation? Hi.
First of all, I'd like to thank Gina for walking me through all this because I'm pretty green on everything that happened. And I don't really have a presentation. I did originally ask for a C2 because of the beer and wine. If they don't want to give me that, the only thing I have in the conditional use would be that was 10:30. I'd like to change that to 11. And the reasoning being at summertime it gets dark after 9. And let's say there was some kind of a sports game on that was ending at 20 after 10 and it went into extra innings. I would want that extra half hour just to get, so I didn't have to say, okay, you have to get out. I don't expect to be open at that time, but I would want to have that available. And my second thing is there's a small area in the back that we plan on doing a patio that we would want people to be able to sit in. So I wasn't sure what the bar itself is a very small little bar. And the bar wouldn't be outside, but I would want to have some sort of outside seating, and I'm not sure if that would be allowed in the C1 with with those conditions.
A question I'd have for you, is, I'm going to ask you because I'm not clear on exactly what the noise ordinance requires. So, I mean, if you're going until 11 o'clock at night, and if you have the roll-up door up, assuming it's a very nice night, whatever noise is inside is going to start coming out. But I guess you'd be subject to the noise ordinance of no
Exactly.
amplified sound after such and such a time
Exactly.
and this sort of thing.
Exactly, and as far as the patio is concerned, I could have that closed off, say, nobody out on the patio past 9 o'clock.
That, I would think that might be a really
That
good idea.
would be reasonable. I do have a residence in back there, and I've talked to them. They'll speak, but I do want that option to have that. Not people like to, I don't plan on having music, that kind of thing. There's not going to be any bands playing. The part that is the beer and wine is very small. I would say 20 people would be the max that could fit in there, probably less. So, did I answer everything? My goal is, actually my vision is I want to open a mercantile. And I want to be able to, on a Sunday morning, somebody go in, have a mimosa, read the paper, no cell phone use, they have to talk to each other. So that's my vision for this small little beer and wine that I want to do.
And how do you plan on dividing the activities, or is it all really one space?
Right now, it'll be divided by a door.
So the
So
beer and wine,
the front part would be the mercantile, and the back part would be the little beer and wine with a little patio outside, lots of plants.
and
Sit
the
on
roll-up
those.
door would be leading to the mercantile?
That's the mercantile, yes.
And so the walk-in door is to the
The
bar?
walk-in door
which is-
would be to the mercantile as well. The only reason I don't want the whole beer and wine for the whole thing is if I do that, since it's not a restaurant, then ABC says no one under 21 can come in the building. So I would have a separate door, no one under 21 can go where the beer and wine is. But they can still bring their kids into the mercantile.
But as between the two areas, do you anticipate open doors or what?
Well, there's a wall with an opening, and I plan on doing a closed door.
ABC will have some strict requirements that she'll have to follow in respect to that, the two different spaces.
And the timing of what has to happen. At 6 doors down is a C2, and it's the Renegade Winery, and they have outdoor seating. And I'm not sure, I haven't asked Sue what they have to do. I know they have live music. I think they shut down at 10, but I could be wrong. So I think ABC puts that time limitation on what you can be doing and how much noise you can make.
So if I understand it then, if you were open till 11, the television would not be in the retail area, it'd be in the
It'd be in that
in the
separate
bar,
room,
and
yeah.
that could have all the doors closed, so
Everything could be
that noise
closed.
to the street.
Nobody on the patio. Actually, the only reason I want the patio is for the Sunday mornings and the paper, no cell phone use.
Sounds wonderful. And we'll ask the county about the patio part.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any public comment on this particular project?
Yes.
Hello.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joe Borden. I live on Main Street. I live approximately 50 feet from where Dixie proposes to have a mercantile and wine and beer bar. I've lived in the town for about 5 years now. It's slowly growing. Main Street is becoming more and more of things. There's a few more merchants and that. Anything that can be done to aid and abet them from the county level, I would totally recommend. Since I am only 50 feet away, noise is something that you might think would bother me. But since we are right across the street from the hotel, and they close about 2 o'clock in the morning, but it's not a big thing. At the other end of the town where the Renegade is, which is a C2, they have music into the night, and they have a huge open area there. They've been there about 2.5 years. They're a tremendous asset to the community. they get, several hundred people. On a Friday or a Saturday night, they have events there for private as well as public. And I would like to throw my support in behind Dixie on this. I believe, since I'm one of the closest people there, living in the area, as being the second closest neighbor, that I believe that she should have the C2. And I believe that part of the reason for that is because, one, as a pass-through, as you were talking about, if somebody wanted to put a garage in there or something, historically, Main Street in that town had a garage. It also had, right next to me, a blacksmith and horse barn, which didn't seem to bother anybody. And for 165 years, we've kind of gotten along with kind of live and let live in that town. And it's a very tight-knit town and very community spirited. And I'd just like to see it remain that way. But I would like to recommend that you take the impediment of the C1 off of her and issue a C2 so that she has more latitude in making a successful business. And Lord knows we need more successful businesses in Calaveras. Okay, I thank you for your time.
Excuse me, sir, did you say you lived off of Main Street?
I live on Main Street.
Okay. So you're not the residents behind the
No,
subject
they are
parcels?
here also.
Okay.
I'm sure they will speak in a couple of
Okay.
minutes. Yes, I live in the old converted market, grocery market.
So before you step away, if that was Zone C2 and another bar came in that was open till 2 in the morning, then what would be your thoughts? Because then it wouldn't require any,
You know, honestly, I don't care.
okay?
Because frankly, I support the people in my town. And if they can bring money in from outside by being open later, that's fine.
Okay,
You know?
thank you for your comments.
Okay, you're welcome.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name's Chris Niebuhr. I'm a McCollum Hill homeowner, business person, parent, blah, 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 many years. And I think that maybe not everyone knows Moke Hill, and it can be hard to understand, but Moke Hill is different because Moke Hill isn't detached. Moke Hill is very tight, very close. Moke Hill is not my town. Moke Hill is my big family. It's my family of 500. And yes, we hear each other. I am one of the hundreds of people in Moke Hill that love hearing whether it's the children playing next door or the band downtown, whatever it is. We embrace it. We are very embracing. And I think it's important to look at this not only in the light of that is how Moke Hill was from the very beginning. A booming, very tight, all-inclusive, no detachment community. It has struggled, but is now trying to come back. And we need latitude from this group and the entire Calaveras County government to do this. We need extreme latitude to respond to quickly changing worlds. She needs that latitude with the C2. Whoever owns that place needs that latitude. I need that latitude in my endeavors that hopefully sometime will come through with the adoption of the general plan update, which is long overdue. And so please give her whatever she wants because the survival of this government is dependent on our economic vitality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mike Delorto. I'm fourth generation McCallum Hill. I have ancestors that were in business on Main Street in McCallum Hill, just a couple down from the hotel. I became a firefighter, volunteer firefighter in that building in 1963, and today I'm the fire chief. I have a long commitment to our community. I'll tell you a little bit about planning. In 1854, the entire commercial district of McCallum Hill burnt to the ground. There was a lot of money in town because there was gold. And that's when the stone structures were brought in. But the fire department did the planning for the community. They held a town meeting and said, Main Street will be 50 feet wide and Center Street will be 60 feet wide. And if you go there today, I can tell you, but when we measure to put banners in, that's what they are. Good planning. I have been a number of places, and I served on the original community plan committee, and I will now find that original copy that's somewhere in the garage, which is in fact the plan that affects the current general plan. There's a couple things that concern me here. One is, first of all, I support her application for her C2. I disagree with what, and if you put the zoning map up again, I realize that McCallum Hill is different than some places, but when I first joined the fire department, downtown there was 2 garages, 4 bars, or places that served alcohol, 2 that served alcohol and food, and on the other end of town there were 2 more. When we did the community plan, we were very concerned about people planning. Communities have gathering centers, they have commercial businesses, they have post offices, they have schools. And we've worked all these years to defend and keep those things for McCallum Hill. We recognize the economy has changed, and we suffered through that for a number of years. The highway changed. When we did the community plan, we made it very clear, and I will find that that entire area was to be counter to all planning rules. And it will be counter to all planning rules because it is zoned commercial or residential, back and forth whichever way you want. We wanted to preserve the opportunity for the community to regain its commercial area in times that go on. I, excuse me, told you what kind of businesses we had when I was a kid. Well, Murphy's only had 1 store, we had 2. They had 1 garage, we had 2. They had 1 bar, we had 4 or 5. So our economics have changed, but Murphy's didn't engage in the degree of planning. If you recall, I believe it was Supervisor Tryon that tried to downplay the planning there. And now we have a very thriving community that is able to afford hire people to work in their fire department to protect the people that are there, which we cannot do in McCallum Hill. So I have a feeling that after looking at this map, you're probably going to see me again. But I want you to know that I support the C2 and I support McCallum Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for signing in.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Logan Johnson. My wife is in here as well. We are the residents that are in the closest proximity to Dixie's firehouse. And we are totally for her C2, her application. It would be we would be the ones who are affected the most on this matter. And we also have a year-old daughter who has sleeping patterns. And the way we justify it is, one, we just like Dixie, and she's honored her word with us so far. I'll be completely honest with you with that. But on the other note, there will be no difference with noise than there would be coming from the Hotel Ledger. Hotel Ledger is the booming spotlight in McCallamy Hill. We know this. And it just is what it is. We trust that she'll honor everything that a C2 could provide, and she's been very nice and gracious to her neighbors. And we don't see any trouble with the patio dream that she has. We don't see any trouble with that. That would literally be right outside of our bedroom window. But there's already noise. Town Hall, Ledger, it makes no difference. It just is. And we can't change that, nor do we want it. We chose to move there. As far as the application goes, we're 100% for the C2. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes,
So,
sir.
assuming that Dixie's success is so immeasurable that she decides to move to San Francisco and take the business with her, and somebody else moves in, you're comfortable with whatever other business that would be permitted under C2 taking over that and without any further review by the county of the uses that would be permitted under C2? Is that fair to say?
I would say so, because on a personal note, we also believe that our neighbors have the right to do with what they want, their own property they're paying their taxes on. Who are we to limit that? If there's a problem, McCallamy Hill has always just kind of settled amongst neighbors, and not in a bad way, but, you know, we're...
No shotguns.
No shot, not recently. But anyways, I mean, we're able to work things out with each other. Speak like adults, we meet up. Some people don't like each other, but they still manage to work things out. And we believe with in the future, we may be able to do the same. Is there any other questions? Us being the closest residents here.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for coming.
Good morning. My name is Will Mosgrove. I'm a resident of McCallamy Hill. Homeowner, also have a business and a rental facility there, a rental building. I'm the chair of the Merchants Association of McCallamy Hill, on the sanitary board, and the community captain, co-captain of the Community Watch. As we heard from the previous statements, McCallamy Hill is in a revival in a really good way right now. It's come back tremendously. It is a very tight community. I fully support Dixie and her efforts to have a C2 permit. It will benefit the town, it will benefit them, and when any one of our businesses grows, the town grows and becomes more secure. So my strong feelings is a C2 is justified. The Renegade Winery is just down the street. They have a C2. To deny her a C2, I think, is unfair and unfit. I hope you see wisely through it and support Dixie in her efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
Yes, I'm Tamara Stewart Thine, and I live in McCallamy Hill. I've lived there for over 30 years, and obviously everyone's talking about the changes in Moke Hill, and they're wonderful. In the last 2 years, it has become a renaissance, and part of that renaissance are the people who have moved here, moved to McCallamy Hill, and helped that and saw the value of the community that we have. It's a wonderful burg to live in. Yes, I couldn't agree more with what people said about we are a tight community. We don't always agree. It is a family. I can't imagine what Dixie has done in that town and others who have helped is you walk downtown McCallamy Hill and there is a sense of pride again. The history's coming back. The buildings are beautiful. They're looking alive. And enhancing this firehouse will do nothing but, again, enhance the town. And as a taxpayer, I like to see revenue coming in, and that's what's happening now to Moke Hill. Not enough, obviously, but people care so much about what's happening in our town, and it's a beautiful little town to come in, and I notice more people. coming in to visit. So the bottom line is, I can't imagine Dixie doing anything but the right thing with this building. I also support the C2. I know one of the problems that you keep coming, or one of the things is, what if she leaves and someone else moves in and they want to do something? Well, that building is very limited. I don't know how you could put a gas station in there. I don't know how you could put a storage unit in there. I can't imagine. And there are, loud bands, and Moke Hill is close. So you're going to hear whatever it is, the music, the entertainment. And I can't imagine anyone coming in, not just with a limited space, but coming in and saying, yeah, I don't really like the look of this town. I think I'll do something to ruin it. I have faith in humanity. I don't think that would ever happen. And again, the Renaissance in Moke Hill is happening. And if you live in San Andreas, wherever you guys live, come visit us. Honestly, friendly, and it's beautiful, and a C2 would make it even better. Thank you. Oh, questions?
I think we're good. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, is there any further public comment today? Okay. Seeing none, we'll close. I thought you...
Fawn McLaughlin.
Greetings.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back.
Yes, it is.
On this side of the podium. I agree with the sentiment of a lot of the people that you've heard from McCollum Hill today, and obviously support Dixie's project. And I live probably 4 doors away, and I'm sandwiched between the Hotel Leger and Renegade Winery that both offer live music. Dixie is a longtime resident of McCollum Hill and has already made an investment through a property that she rents right next door. So this is really an expansion for her. The quality of her construction and ideas and design are exemplary. I would also say what Tamara just mentioned about the restrictions of this rock building, are such that the kinds of uses that would be allowed in a C2 zone are not going to be the kinds of uses that would find that building attractive. So I think that kind of threat is not much of a threat for when Dixie and Harry decide to move and take their road, go on the road to San Francisco. The other thing I would just point out about, actually I could talk a lot about plan development, because the way it was described today is that the design review was implementing plan development. Plan development was created, or the design review process was created in McCollum Hill by this group of professionals, really, architects, designers, to replace plan development. It wasn't put in place to implement it. And so, in fact, when I was sitting where you were, we had a lot of discussions about it's time for plan development to go away. In fact, in McCollum Hill with the community plan update, a lot of people volunteered that aren't subject to plan development to be subject to design review with the caveat that plan development goes away. So right now, for like Dixie, it's double jeopardy, really. She's hit twice, design review and plan development. So, in which she has been graciously saying, okay, I'm gonna, be subject to, but seriously, put that back on the top of the agenda if you can.
I've tried.
The only other thing I wanted to mention was, right now with the existing community plan, evidently the zoning is C1, which is, or is a compatible zone, or is C2. And if you look at the new community plan, or the new community plan in McCollum Hill, which is not yet adopted yet, but the land use designation for Dixie's property will be historic commercial. So, which would, if that were in place today, she wouldn't be applying for a general plan amendment. So, there's that. Again, I think I fully support, Dixie's, what everyone said here today is that McCollum Hill really is trying to bring itself back to some of its former heydays and its ebbs and flows of economic development, and having that kind of flexibility, I think, would be important, not only for Dixie, but for future owners of the building as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further public comment? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment, and we're going to come back for any rebuttal that you may have.
I suppose if you're going to consider C2, as most everyone stood up and indicated that they would have absolutely no issue with, then the conditions, obviously, that we've applied to the use of a beer and wine bar would go away. But if, in fact, we're entertaining the idea of C1 with a use permit, then I don't think we have any objection to extending the hours of operation to 11 o'clock. I just kind of arbitrarily came up with 10:30 because I Googled the hours of operation at the hotel across the street, and during the week they actually close at 10:30. It's only, I believe, Friday and Saturday night that they're open extended hours to 2 a.m. So I just kind of came up with the 10:30 time frame to be consistent with the use across the street. So if you want to entertain the 11 o'clock, I don't have any objection. The patio was a concern with ours just because there is a residence behind, and as we all have spoken before, Dixie may not be the last owner of that property, and the gentleman and his wife that spoke today may not be the last owners of the residential parcel behind the street or the subject parcel as well. So all of that just needs to be taken into consideration. It doesn't appear that anyone in McCollum Hill, at least those that have spoken today, have any issues with C2. So I would say that's probably completely up to your discretion at this point.
What about the patio? I don't think was contemplated in the materials we got today. Would that
No,
change
so
anything?
it was kind of an informal idea that she had discussed with me, which is really what made me start thinking about appropriate zoning with the fact that there is residential zoning and actual uses so close to the subject parcel. And I just found it to be incompatible, and frankly, I was just kind of out there looking out for the residents in the R1 zones, on the R1 zoned lots. Would you want to live next door to a bar? Would you want to live next door to a bar that had a patio extended out the back? I think Dixie seems to be a very gracious person, and I'm certain that, if she says we're just going to be drinking mimosas and reading the newspaper, that's probably all true. But here again, you have to consider down the road in the future.
My question is, would you have to change anything that you've presented us?
Oh.
If we were going to go with C1, would you have to change anything given the idea of the patio?
No, so the patio extension, she would actually have to apply for that through the ABC license. The only reason we restricted it was because of the R1 zoned parcel directly behind it.
But I didn't see any specific restriction or permission for a patio.
No, you did not.
And so if we were to go C1, the papers that you presented us today would permit the patio? I mean, the patio would not be inconsistent with...
As conditioned to eliminate any concern with a potential impact to the residential neighborhood, we conditioned the use permit to exclude outdoor use of a patio or any other activity associated with the wine and beer bar.
This may well be academic.
Okay.
Can I ask a question of her at this point?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. On the land use map, page 3 in our packet, it appears that the area on the left side of Main Street down to including the Renegade property is all commercial plan development. Is that right? Is that
So,
CPD? That's all?
The CPD, it represents commercial. The PD is obviously planned development, which still applies until we amend the code. But yes, so the C is in reference to commercial.
That's the general plan designation.
Right.
The zoning is C1. Well, it's a mix of different zones as you go down. There's C1, and then
So-
R1 and C2, all with the PD overlay.
Right. But then on the zoning map, page 4, it looks like all the commercial items are designated C1s.
With the exception of that corner parcel down on Center
The
and
Renegade.
Main.
The Renegade.
The Renegade,
Yes.
But the leisure is C1.
Correct.
What's going on here?
Well, as discussed before, there's a lot of inconsistencies between land use and zoning and even general plan designation in this community.
I think the question
How it
is,
got-
how can they be C1 and be the hotel?
Well, because the hotel was there prior to the zoning.
Ah.
Yeah. It's a pre-existing non-conforming use.
So essentially Dixie has asked for a C2.
She's asked for C2,
Originally.
yes.
She's willing to go with C1, but it sounds like she really wants C2.
Sounds like she really wants C2.
And that would be consistent with the Renegade property,
Yes,
and it would be consistent with the de facto situation at the Leger.
correct.
Any other reasons we should go with C1?
The only thing I can think of is that it would create an inconsistent zoning with the general plan update, but we've already got that inconsistency going on in the community.
Commissioner Sisk?
I'm ready to uphold the planning. See what, sorry. For the C1, I think it should be C1.
Okay.
Were you into discussion?
I guess I needed to go to rebuttal for Dixie.
This isn't an appeal hearing, so I don't think there really is any.
No rebuttal, just-
I mean, if there's any questions you might have for,
Okay, so we can keep discussing. And do you want to go ahead and close the hearing, bring it back, and we'll do our deliberations as we already started?
Well, I'd like to commend the
Was it
planning.
your turn?
Well,
We were going down the line.
oh, I'm sorry. But I didn't know when we'd start.
Can we
I
hear
was
from
that-
Commissioner Wooster? Because I'd like to kind of keep going down the line. if you
Yeah,
want to
I have a
comment.
question. If the general plan update goes through, then C2 would be incompatible with the land use designation at that time. If she already had a C2 zoning, what's the effect? She just keeps with C2?
so once we adopt the general plan, we will be going through an exercise to bring the zoning into conformance with the general plan. If the range of zones remain the same through the adoption process, that would make it inconsistent with the general plan, and we would need to rezone it to bring it into compliance with the general plan. That would be the county's action, not the applicant. She would then have a legal nonconforming use of the bar.
So she could keep her bar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the legal nonconforming use could continue in perpetuity unless it was actually discontinued for 12 months, then the legal nonconforming use would go away. But as long as it's continued, it would be allowed to exist.
I didn't hear your question clearly, but Peter, your response, based on what the general plan update looks like that's sitting out there, not approved, what did we do? Because we did a whole lot of work in this neighborhood when we were working on that general plan. It would revert back upon the adoption? She wouldn't be able to continue to have the C2? If we approve her C2 today, does that change the general plan update when it gets adopted?
It doesn't change the general plan update. It would, because the action of adopting the general plan itself does not change the zoning. There would be another process we go through to bring the zoning into conformance with the land use designations. And if it remains the same right now with historic commercial only allowing the C1 and not the C2, then we would have to change that as we go through and systematically bring the zoning into conformance with the general plan.
Change which, though?
Change the zoning. So
Change
it would
the
have to be
historic- Change the new zoning?
well, there's two possibilities. You could revise the land use designation list of compatible zones to include C2, but that would apply countywide. Or you could recognize that there is an existing bar, rezone the property to C1, and it would continue to operate under the legal nonconforming status as the hotel is currently operating.
Okay, so if you stay, okay, wow. Thinking back to when we were working on this neighborhood, because it's very similar to where I live, where business residences are stacked on top of each other, and we've got some really bad issues there, but it works. People like it. It's kind of like what everybody said out here in the crowd. If we went with C1 and a CUP, does she have to come in yearly on that conditional use permit, or is that a one-time conditional use permit and she continues to function that way?
It's a one-time unless you wanted to expand it beyond what the limits of the use permit are.
And it runs with the land as well, so if
Okay.
she were to sell the property and the new owner wanted to continue that use as defined under the conditional use permit, they could certainly do so.
Okay, and on the one corner lot that is C2, did we in the general plan update address changing that over to C1, or we left that alone? Because we
Well,
made changes in these
again, we're
neighborhoods,
not-
do you remember?
The general plan, again, the general plan is not changing the zoning.
Just the historic, okay.
So the whole thing is slated to be designated as a historic center. And in the historic center, C2 is not found as a compatible zoning. So I guess in theory, according to Peter, eventually that C2 zoned parcel may even get rezoned C1 once the general plan is adopted.
That's what I was getting at, okay.
So as it looks right now today, C2 zoning would not be compatible in the historic
historical
center,
center.
which is McCollum Hill. Now, I can't speak for what's out at the highway. I didn't expand out. I didn't look at that. We're just kind of focused in on this street right now. But in fact, the C2 zone, as you see today, could even possibly go away with the adoption of the new general plan update, eventually.
The historic district does not extend out to the highway, so those commercial uses that are on the highway could retain, if it's C2, that wouldn't affect it. But again,
My only
this is
concern
a-
is that it is in the historical district where we're looking at, and that was, I mean, it doesn't even matter because the GPU is not adopted, so anything could change with that between now and then. And right now, we're focused
Correct.
on what we're here about today.
Right.
But I'm just
So-
processing this thought of what the future would look like there, and that's important. I see you, but public comment's closed, but I know you have a lot of history. I'd like to hear from you. I'm sorry. Can you come to the mic?
Relative to the zone, the C1 zone has permitted uses, and the C2 has permitted uses. When you're redoing the zoning code, you could adjust what's allowed in a C1, which would cover the same thing. Is that not correct?
Well, go ahead, because that's not the issue.
Well, another exercise we'll need to go through is an update of the zoning ordinance.
Right.
And there has been discussion, I mean, we'll need to do a comprehensive zoning update, which is probably going to be as difficult, if not more so, than the general plan itself. But we have discussed internally, some changes to the commercial zones that might consider a beer and wine as a use permitted by right in a zone. That's, not something that we're processing at the moment, but it is something that might, that we certainly could consider in the future.
But that's separate from historic.
That's, again, we're talking about zoning versus general plan designation.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question. When did the Renegade get to the C2?
The exact date, it appears that it was zoned on the heels of the adoption of the McCalmy Hill Community Plan.
And that year would have been,
I don't recall. No. Longer than the community plan? No, it had the same zoning amendment number as the rest of the parcels, which were consistent with the adoption of the community plan originally, 88.
Okay.
So it's been C2 for some time.
Is there any further comments down there?
I have some more questions. This project is pretty much in the center of the Moke Hill Commercial District, is that right?
Correct.
And it's surrounded by a retail store to the north and a town hall to the south, the Hotel Ledger, which is a hotel, bar, and restaurant to
Right.
the east, and a residence to the west.
Correct.
And the allowable uses now would include a fire station with fire trucks going in and out.
Yes, with the PS zone, correct.
Okay, now, if you look at the whole of this project, including the extent of the minor changes to the existing building, the location near the center of the commercial district, the surrounding buildings and their uses, the existing levels of noise, would you say that there is a potential for causing a significant effect on the environment by this project?
As proposed or as recommended?
As proposed. And then, as recommended.
That's a good question.
So I guess you're leading to the question of whether or not you think the exemption is appropriate, and whether or not there may be a potential for significant impact, regardless of whether or not that may or may not fit that exemption. I don't think that there would be a significant potential for noise or land use incompatibility. I think there are some land use issues that we've looked at from a zoning perspective of trying to incorporate the unique configuration of the juxtaposition of land. But given the overall uses within the community, the potential for significant environmental effect of this change, I do believe that that exemption fits. I don't think that the noise situation is such that it raises to the level of significance that would require a negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration to be prepared.
I think it's kind of already been touched upon too as well. I think the building itself is pretty self-limiting. You know, a lot of the uses that we are calling out as permitted in C2 are just frankly unlikely and probably never going to happen. Just in the existing building, that doesn't obviously mean that that building won't, you know, say burn down or something and someone else build something else. But the lot itself is pretty small as well. So I guess you can make a finding that there's a limitation based on the parcel size in the existing building in the historic district itself. That uses in the C2 zone just frankly may not be compatible.
Well, my question really was going to whether this project qualifies for an exemption under CEQA 15061B3 as a project that does not have a potential for causing a significant effect on the environment, in addition to the exemption that you cited in the staff report for minor modifications to an existing building. And I think I've received the answer that that exemption for projects that don't have the potential to cause a significant effect on the environment does apply.
That's the general rule.
Commissioner Laddish?
Well, in discussion, which I think we're in now.
Yes.
I wanted to start off by commending the planning department for coming forth with its recommendation, because I think many communities require this sort of protection. I think by coming forth with your recommendation, we've made this a very good public hearing where we've heard the community of Moke Hill, which I think even visiting Moke Hill, you walk down these these days, you get the feeling that this is a vibrant community. And hearing from all the citizens that we have today, I'm not about to sit up here and say, oh, we know better what your good interests are. We'll protect you from that. So I commend you for bringing that forward, but I think we've heard the will of the community, and I think this looks like a wonderful project. I think people are keeping well in mind that this particular project could go away, and they could have somebody else there doing whatever C2 uses are available, and I wanted to make sure that the public was aware of that. But I'm fully in favor of granting the request as C2, with thanks to you for framing the issue so well.
So this was originally circulated as a zoning amendment to C2, for which we actually didn't receive any negative comments or objections on the project at all. So
that's
you know,
where I think by your bringing the recommendation,
Right.
we would have, in most other communities, we would have had the bride side and the groom side and,
Right.
and hearing from both sides considerably. Here we hear from one side, and if there were another side, they'd have full opportunity to have come here and express their concerns. So that's, I'm fully convinced that under these circumstances,
yes.
we should go
And
with
we
C2.
recognize that that wasn't the most popular recommendation, but we felt it was necessary in order to protect what we potentially thought might be a concern, but obviously the community's expressed that there are no concerns in respect to commercial C2 zoning.
And this is the way government's supposed to work.
That's right.
Of course, I'm only speaking for myself.
Is there anybody else here that has questions?
No more questions.
Any more discussion? Okay. Well, we have to have some discussion because somebody's proposed C2. And what's before us is a recommendation for C1 with a CUP. So we do have to have discussion to decide which direction we're going in amongst the 5 commissioners. There is no formal motion on the table. So I think what I'd like to do is just start off polling the commissioners to see, unless you want to have further discussion on the 2 options before, well, we have 1 option before us, maybe changing it to 2, and that would mean having to rewrite the recommendation. So let's kind of poll the commissioners to see where we're at. So,
C2?
okay,
C2.
okay,
I'm in favor of C2.
okay. Then we will need to go to lunch because it's almost straight up 12 o'clock. Do I want to do what? I don't know, do you want to do, we can't read a recommendation without a resolution for changing this?
Well, I
What do
can
you wanna
change
do?
the resolution. Modifying the resolution's simple.
You want to simply do it?
Yeah, I
Okay,
can.
let's simply do it.
Okay.
Well, I do think that we should include the other exemption, CEQA exemption.
So we're accept twice?
Well, it would be the exemption that says that this project does not have a potential to significantly affect the environment for all the reasons it's been stated, rather than just relying upon the fact that the physical changes are relatively minor to the building. Because if we're,
As long as the exemption that's stated is adequate, I've become well aware of how we can set precedent and have somebody come in and say, well, this is just like the situation you had in McCullum Hill. I'm convinced that as stated, it's exempt from the CEQA requirements, and I'd like to stick at that.
No, we're looking at you.
I don't think it's really makes a big difference either way, and we can certainly add the additional finding if you feel that's appropriate. You know, if it's exempt, it's exempt. You know, it falls under one or more categories. And so if you feel that that other exemption fits the situation, then we can certainly add that. We actually debated whether or not we should use that exemption. And my call was not to use it. We'll probably need to tweak the language a little bit because of, you know, you know, throughout we've referred to the C1. We'll need to go through it. I hate to have everyone have to come back after lunch, but if everyone understands that it's going to be approved with C2 and we'll just come back and make take the final action.
Right.
It has to go to the board anyway, so there's, you know, it's a legislative act, so it needs to go to the board for final action.
And the reference in the other resolution is really easy, the way I put it together. I can just simply go in and omit all of the reference, all the findings and conditions for the CUP, and all reference to the CUP, and just call it plan development regarding the exterior changes. And then we just simply change the resolution for the zoning amendment from C1 PD to C2 PD.
Are you all good with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason I made the suggestion to expand the environmental exception was the thinking that the planning commission is supposed to consider the whole project, and when you have an intended use that's been brought before you, such as, by way of example, a dollar store in West Point, you have to consider the whole project. And that's why I suggested what I did.
Yeah, I just think it's different when you're talking about an exemption. No, I think as long as we've got one valid reason for exemption, why stating another one, although, I mean, I agree that it's exempt under, this project would be exempt under the exemption you're suggesting. I just am wary of what we're going to hear in the future and trying to distinguish this project from others when we don't need to.
My only concern is that when we worked on the general plan update, there was a person that came forward from Aqualami Hill wanting a different scenario on their parcel. And this could have impacts. And so it's always just that one person that we're not taking care of addressing this in this report, in this vote, that we need to be careful with.
So your argument is that we should have both reasons specified? I can go either way. I can see both arguments. If there is a slippery slope, then let's put both in there.
I see the slippery slope by putting both in.
Okay, so why do you see it as a slippery slope putting it in there?
That we will find somebody who wants another C2 situation in some other town and saying, well, here you're allowing somebody to have a bar right in the middle of the town and everything else, and so it's not going to have an environmental effect. And I want to put a bar in, let's say Sheep Ranch, and they'd, you know, would use this as a precedent, which we could distinguish, et cetera. It seems to me it's just
I think for me,
unnecessary.
I think the difference for me would be that going into the future, I know that this is being appointed as a historical center, and not many other places in this county are getting that designation, correct? So that kind of...
But we're making the decision today, not with it being historical center.
I know, but that still weighs heavily on my mind. Okay, so we need to poll what direction we're going in. Do we want those changes? Do we want to leave it? Where are we headed?
Well, I think the changes that has been outlined by Gina sound great to me.
Okay.
And I would go with the one exemption.
I would do the Gina changes, we'll call them, and the two exemptions.
Well, I still say leave it as it is. So. Okay.
2 exemptions, C2.
Okay, and I'm saying 2 exemptions, C2 as well.
That's fine.
Okay.
And the other is a general rule?
Okay. Okay, so do you need to rewrite this? Are you okay with this, just laying it out with the amended changes? What do we want to, just go ahead and vote?
I can easily lay it out with the amended changes. It's not a big deal.
Okay. You're all okay with
I
that?
do believe Kelly had some typos, which I didn't actually mark down. If
I
you
did.
want to, he's my
You knew those were
proofreader. I
coming.
know. Since they were just typos, you want to just give me your, there was what, two?
Well,
right?
one typo turns out not to be a typo
Oh, okay.
because of the change from C1 to C2.
Okay.
The other one is really minor. It's on Resolution 2017-097, which is approving the zoning amendment. It's just page 2 of 3, the evidence under number paragraph 2, second to last line, it says, "and provide sufficient area." Should say, "and to provide sufficient area." And then on 098, it's just a typo in the heading. District needs a T at the end of it, second line.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So are we in?
Also on that last one, 098, third page, item 2, evidence, second line, generally small, comma, providing no opportunity. And then the 6th line down, after Moke Hill, most residents, and TS, I think it is.
You're good. Most resident. Oh, good.
And then you're going to change hours of operation, or it's just not even going to be limited?
It's not gonna, there's no CUP. And the town is saying that they know that she'll be respectful.
Now, in Resolution 097, when you get down to be it therefore resolved, I'm not sure what you're going to be, is now the Planning Commission, Planning Commission recommends approval of zoning amendment. It needs to, you have to have two TO C2.
Okay, I'm sorry. Say that
Okay.
again.
On the be it therefore resolved on Resolution 097, which I'm getting a little lost as to how many resolutions we're really going to have here.
Just still 3.
Anyhow, just to be entirely clear, I think it should be it therefore resolved that the Planning Commission recommends approval of the zoning amendment to TO C2.
Zoning amendment.
I just wonder if maybe if you're fully confident that you can reshuffle this and deal out the resolution that comes up the way we want it, then that's fine.
You want me to make my changes and bring it back to you so you can review it over your break?
Well,
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty minor. We can handle that.
Okay.
okay.
All right. Well, are we ready? We have 3 different resolutions.
Do we still have 3 resolutions?
Yes.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though, we have a general plan amendment, we have a
Zoning
zoning
amendment and a
amendment.
plan development.
Oh, and plan development.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
The conditional
stinky
uses.
old plan development.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with 096. Would you like to read the recommendation, please?
Okay. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve Resolution 2017-096, amending the general plan land use designation of assessor parcel number 18047-083 from public service to commercial based upon the findings contained therein.
As amended.
As amended.
No? On the general plan?
Yes.
Oh,
The
no.
general plan would include the CEQA
Oh,
exemption.
okay.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-1. Commissioner Sisk says no.
No on the general plan? Okay.
Okay. Second recommendation?
See if I can get this right. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve Resolution 2017-097, amending the zoning of assessor parcel number 018-047-083 from Public Service, PS, to C2PD, General Commercial with a Planned Development, based on the findings contained therein as amended?
You said 047?
0, huh?
When you were reading that recommendation,
That was the
What,
APN.
Is the APN wrong?
it's 043, I thought you
Oh.
read 047?
Oh, yeah, it's wrong on both of them. All three of them. The correct assessor parcel number is 018-007-043.
Thank you.
I apologize.
On ours, it's correct.
Yeah.
On yours, you read it out loud wrong. So, sorry.
Oh,
Are we okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So can I get a motion?
We're okay, I so move.
Thank you. Okay, and can I get a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 4-1 again. And then we will go to recommendation number 3, please.
Okay. Last but not least, staff recommends the Planning Commission approve Resolution 2017-098, approving Plan Development Permit 2017-099, authorizing exterior changes to the building located on Assessor Parcel Number 018-007-043.
As amended.
In conformance with the McCalmy Hill Design Guidelines based upon the findings contained therein as amended.
Thank you. Okay, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There was 5-0. Right? Okay, so no opposed.
Who was the first and second? I'm sorry.
It was Kelly and Bocelli. Okay, so on that note, congratulations. Okay, and we're going to go to lunch, and we'll be back at 1. Do you need any extra time for anything?
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't know, I thought he was going to say something.
Well, I just want to say that the zoning and the general plan amendment automatically go to the Board of Supervisors. The action on the plan development is final today, unless appealed to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
One or 1:15?
We're going to go to 1:30 because we need a little extra time.